Stop scrolling for just 1 second, because what you're about to hear is not just another talent show story. This is the moment a quiet Filipino dreamer walked onto the AGT live stage, didn't try to copy a legend, and instead changed the energy of the entire room forever. And before we go any further, if stories about courage, music, and impossible dreams inspire you even a little, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because stories like this deserve to be shared. When the lights dimmed and the crowd buzzed with anticipation, no one expected much from the man standing alone under the spotlight. He wore a simple jacket, slightly worn shoes, and carried himself with the calm of someone who had already lived a lifetime of rejection. The whispers started immediately. Another Elvis? Is this an impersonation act? Judges exchanged polite smiles, the kind that said they'd seen this before. But what they didn't see was the long road that brought him here, stretching all the way back to a small neighborhood in the Philippines where dreams were often quieter than survival. He grew up in a cramped house where the roof leaked during monsoon season and music came from a battered radio that only worked when held at the right angle. His mother cleaned houses. His father took whatever work he could find. At night, when the world finally slowed down, the boy would sit by the radio and listen to Elvis Presley's voice crackle through static. But instead of copying the sound, he listened to the feeling. The loneliness. The fire. The ache to be heard. That was what he carried with him, not the accent or the moves, but the soul behind the songs. As a teenager, he sang at fiestas, weddings, and funerals. People told him he sounded too different. When he tried to imitate Elvis more closely, judges laughed. When he sang in his own style, they told him to pick a lane. There were years when he stopped singing altogether, convinced that maybe his voice was meant to stay small, meant only for narrow streets and late-night radios. But something kept pulling him back. Not fame. Not money. Just the need to express what words alone couldn't. Fast forward to America, where he worked long shifts, sent money home, and sang only when no one was listening. AGT wasn't his first audition. It wasn't even his 10th. Each rejection added weight to his chest, but also strength to his spine. By the time he reached the live shows, he wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. He was there to tell the truth in his voice. Back on that stage, the music began. Familiar, yes, but altered. Slower. Darker. When he sang the first line, the audience leaned in. This wasn't Elvis reborn. This was Elvis reimagined through heartbreak, migration, and survival. His voice carried years of sacrifice, nights of doubt, and the quiet resilience of millions who leave home chasing something they can't fully explain. The judges' smiles faded. One leaned forward. Another's eyes widened. Then came the moment everything shifted. Instead of copying the iconic moves, he stood still. He closed his eyes. He let the song breathe. And in that stillness, the arena changed. People stopped filming. Some stopped breathing. A woman in the front row wiped tears she didn't expect. A judge's hand covered their mouth in disbelief. This wasn't nostalgia. This was transformation. When the final note hung in the air, there was silence. Not the awkward kind, the sacred kind. Then the crowd erupted. A standing ovation thundered through the venue. The man on stage looked stunned, like he had just woken up from a dream he was afraid to believe. In that moment, he wasn't just representing himself. He was carrying every immigrant, every overlooked artist, every person told they were almost good enough. The judges spoke about bravery, about originality, about how honoring a legend doesn't mean copying them, it means understanding their spirit and pushing it forward. One judge admitted they were wrong to underestimate him. Another said they felt like they had witnessed something rare and honest. And for the first time, he allowed himself to smile fully, without apology. If this story is moving you right now, take a second, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us why we dream in the first place, and your support helps bring more of them to life. After the show, messages poured in from around the world. Filipinos saw themselves in him. Immigrants felt seen. Young singers who were told to sound more like someone else suddenly believed their own voice might be enough. He didn't win overnight fame or instant perfection, but he won something deeper: validation without compromise. The real victory wasn't the applause or the votes. It was the moment he realized he didn't have to imitate anyone to belong on that stage. He had transformed it simply by being honest. And that honesty echoed far beyond the lights, traveling back to small houses, cracked radios, and quiet dreamers everywhere. By the end of the night, as he walked off stage, he looked back once. Not at the judges. Not at the crowd. But at the empty microphone stand. A silent thank you. For holding his truth. For not asking him to be someone else. And that's the message that lingers long after the music fades. You don't need to be a perfect copy to be powerful. You don't need permission to transform a space that was never designed for you. Sometimes, all it takes is standing still, opening your voice, and letting the world finally hear who you are. Wait, don't blink. Because in just a few seconds, a man the judges thought they already understood was about to remind the world what transformation really sounds like. And before the story pulls you in completely, do me a quick favor: tap the like button and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this don't just entertain, they awaken something inside us. When he walked onto the AGT live stage, the audience reacted almost automatically. A Filipino man. Elvis song. The assumptions were instant. Some smiled politely, some leaned back in their seats, already convinced they knew how this would end. Another impersonator. Another tribute act. Another moment that would fade as quickly as it came. But what no one in that room could see was that this man wasn't carrying a costume, he was carrying a lifetime. His story didn't begin with bright lights or applause. It began in a crowded Philippine neighborhood where electricity flickered and dreams felt like luxuries. Music was never taught in schools there, it was felt in the air. At birthdays, at wakes, at late-night gatherings where laughter and sadness shared the same table. Elvis wasn't just a singer to him. Elvis was emotion. Pain dressed as melody. Hope disguised as rhythm. As a child, he didn't copy the voice. He listened to the cracks in it. The vulnerability. He learned early that singing wasn't about sounding perfect, it was about surviving out loud. But survival doesn't always reward honesty. Teachers told him his voice was strange. Producers told him he needed to sound more American. Even friends suggested he lean harder into imitation if he wanted to succeed. So he tried. And every time he did, something felt wrong. Like wearing someone else's skin. Years passed. Life got heavier. He moved overseas chasing opportunity, working exhausting jobs that left his voice tired before the sun even set. Some nights, he sang quietly just to remember who he was. Other nights, he questioned if the dream had already expired. But something inside him refused to go silent. AGT Live wasn't a miracle, it was a risk. Standing on that stage meant being judged not just for talent, but for identity. As the music cue began, he made a decision that would change everything. He wouldn't imitate. He wouldn't impress. He would tell the truth. The first note came out softer than expected. Slower. The arrangement felt unfamiliar, and that's when the room shifted. This wasn't Elvis as people remembered him. This was Elvis filtered through loneliness, migration, and resilience. Every lyric felt heavier. Every breath carried history. The audience stopped whispering. Judges who were ready to critique were now listening. He didn't move much. No exaggerated gestures. No costume tricks. Just a man and a voice trembling with honesty. And then something extraordinary happened. The emotion crossed the stage barrier. People weren't watching anymore. They were feeling. Tears appeared unexpectedly. A judge swallowed hard. Another leaned forward as if pulled by the sound itself. When he reached the final note, he held it, not for drama, but because letting go felt too soon. When silence finally arrived, it wasn't empty. It was full. Heavy. Sacred. Then the eruption. Cheers. Standing ovation. Shock written across faces that moments earlier had doubted him. If you're feeling this moment right now, pause for 1 second, like the video and subscribe. Before you decide what this story is, stay with me until the end, because what happened on that AGT live stage wasn't about an Elvis song, or even about winning. It was about a man who stepped into the spotlight carrying a lifetime of silence, and turned it into something unforgettable. And if stories about courage, identity, and impossible dreams move you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because voices like this almost never get heard twice. Red Heart. When he walked out, the reaction was immediate and predictable. A Filipino contestant. An Elvis song choice. The audience thought they knew the script. Some nodded politely. Some prepared to be entertained, not transformed. The judges smiled with that familiar look, curious, cautious, already measuring expectations. No one in that room knew they were seconds away from being proven wrong. He stood there quietly, hands steady, eyes focused, breathing deep. Not because he was nervous, but because he understood the weight of the moment. This stage was bigger than him. Bigger than the song. Bigger than every rejection that had followed him from one country to another. And yet, this was the first time he wasn't planning to hide. His story began far from bright stages and applause. It started in the Philippines, in a place where music wasn't a career path, it was comfort. It lived in karaoke nights, long bus rides, and radios playing through static. Elvis Presley's voice didn't arrive to him as glamour. It arrived as emotion. Pain. Longing. A reminder that someone, somewhere, understood what it felt like to want more. As a boy, he sang wherever he could. But every compliment came with conditions. You're good, but different. You should sound more like the original. Lean into the imitation. Over time, he learned that the world loved familiar echoes more than original truths. And so he tried to fit. Tried to mimic. Tried to adjust his voice until it felt smaller each time. Life didn't slow down to let him dream. He worked. He struggled. He migrated. Long hours. Quiet rooms. Songs sung under his breath so no one would hear the doubt in them. There were moments he almost quit, not because he lacked talent, but because he was tired of being told who he had to be in order to belong. AGT Live was never meant to be a breakthrough. It was closure. One last moment to sing honestly, without chasing approval. As the music started, he made a choice that would change everything. He didn't perform Elvis. He revealed himself. The arrangement was different. Slower. He didn't rush the melody. When the first note left his lips, something in the room shifted. This wasn't nostalgia. This wasn't imitation. This was a story wrapped in sound. His voice carried homesickness, sacrifice, and the quiet resilience of someone who has survived being overlooked. The audience leaned forward. The judges stopped writing notes. The performance demanded presence. There were no flashy moves, no exaggerated gestures, just raw emotion unfolding line by line. And then the unexpected happened. People started feeling things they weren't prepared for. A lump in the throat. Wet eyes. Silence where judgment used to be. Halfway through the song, he closed his eyes, not to avoid the crowd, but to trust himself. Every lyric landed heavier than the last. He wasn't trying to impress. He was confessing. And in doing so, he gave everyone permission to listen without comparison. If you're feeling this moment right now, pause, like the video and subscribe. Because stories like this remind us why authenticity still matters. Raising hands. When the final note faded, there was a pause so long it felt unreal. No cheers yet. No applause. Just realization. Then the room exploded. A standing ovation rose like a wave. Judges stood. Some shook their heads in disbelief. One wiped their eyes before speaking. They didn't talk about Elvis. They talked about bravery. About transformation. About how the greatest tribute is not copying a legend, but understanding their soul and daring to make it your own. One judge admitted they had expected something familiar and instead received something unforgettable. Backstage, the man sat alone. Not celebrating. Crying. Because for the first time, he hadn't betrayed his voice to be accepted. And the world accepted him anyway. Messages flooded in after the show. From immigrants who felt invisible. From singers afraid of sounding wrong. From people who had spent years shrinking themselves to fit expectations. He hadn't just performed. He had represented something real. And that's why this moment mattered. Because he showed us that imitation may get applause, but truth creates impact. That transformation happens the moment you stop asking, "Is this what they want?" and start asking, "Is this who I am?" As he left the stage that night, there was no guarantee of a trophy. No promise of fame. But there was something far greater: freedom. The freedom to exist without apology. So remember this when you're told to be more like someone else. Remember this when your voice feels too different, too quiet, too real. Because sometimes, the thing that sets you apart is exactly what changes everything. Musical note sparkles before you decide this is just another talent show story. Listen closely, because what happened on that AGT live stage wasn't imitation, it was revelation. And if stories about hidden strength, courage, and music that changes lives mean something to you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more stories like this reach the people who need them most. When he stepped into the spotlight, the room reacted before he even opened his mouth. Some clapped politely. Some smirked. Others whispered the same thought, "Another Elvis." It wasn't cruel, it was expectation. They had seen the jumpsuits, the hip swings, the copied accents. They thought they knew the ending. What they didn't know was that this man had already lost more than their opinions could ever take from him. His journey began far from bright stages, in a place where dreams often had to wait behind responsibility. In the Philippines, music wasn't a career, it was comfort. It lived in karaoke nights after long days, in songs sung to distract from hunger, in melodies that helped people forget how small their worlds sometimes felt. Elvis reached him through an old speaker with broken knobs, but it wasn't the fame that captured him. It was the emotion. The way a voice could sound strong and broken at the same time. As he grew older, singing became his refuge. But refuge doesn't always protect you. People told him he sounded off. Not wrong, just not familiar enough. When he tried to imitate, he felt empty. When he sang from the heart, he was told it wouldn't sell. Every critique chipped away at his confidence until silence started to feel safer than rejection. Life pulled him away from music. Work came first. Family needs came first. Survival came first. He moved across borders carrying a suitcase filled with clothes and a voice he barely used anymore. Late at night, when exhaustion settled into his bones, he would hum quietly, afraid to wake the world, afraid to hope again. AGT Live wasn't destiny, it was defiance. Standing on that stage meant standing exposed. As the music began, he felt the weight of judgment pressing in. He knew what they expected. And in that moment, he made a choice that terrified him. He wouldn't perform what they wanted. He would perform who he was. The song started differently than anyone anticipated. Slower. Softer. The notes carried restraint, like someone holding back tears. Confusion crossed a few faces, but then something deeper took over. His voice wasn't trying to be Elvis. It was telling a story Elvis once told, through the voice of a man who knew loneliness in a different language. The arena changed. Phones lowered. Breaths were held. Every lyric felt personal, like it was aimed directly at the heart. He didn't dance. He didn't pose. He stood still, as if rooted by every sacrifice that brought him there. And somehow, that stillness spoke louder than movement ever could. When his voice cracked, not from error, but emotion, you could feel the audience break with him. Judges who were prepared to critique were now witnesses. One blinked rapidly, fighting tears. Another leaned forward, forgetting the cameras entirely. This wasn't nostalgia. This was truth. As the final note faded, silence stretched longer than comfort allows. Then the room exploded. Applause rose like a wave, crashing over him before he could understand what he'd done. He looked stunned, not proud, not victorious, just